HP, and we've got Pip joining us as well, who is responsible for energy and sustainability and design innovation. He has a lot of hats that he wears within ARC data centers. And I'm going to join this panel, you lucky people, because I've spoken to a lot of people about this, so I think I might hopefully be able to contribute a little bit.
Over the
Okay, yeah, let's go. Okay, I have some slides for you. So if I get them up. So we have heard a lot in the last panel. We heard about certificates being used for documenting renewable energy, and that they had no function. And for years, you have now been able to get a green tariff from your electricity supplier, and you have been able to tick the box and move on. But that time has passed. So if you are to claim that you are using renewable energy, you will be asked a lot of questions, and there's a need for credibility in that claim. So then it's about being courageous. And I'm HP, as mentioned before. Because we help companies credibly claim the renewable origin of the electricity, or energy actually, that they use globally. And I just want to make one clarification. In the last panel, it was mentioned that to buy GOs or REGOs was like having a big stake and paying the neighbor for, which is vegan, for offsetting your stake. That is not what a guarantee of origin or a REGO is. That analogy is linked to carbon offsets. A guarantee of origin is an attribute linked to something that actually has been produced. And the reason why this is a very efficient methodology for electricity and energy is that there are non-physical attributes linked to energy that consumers want to document. You cannot, again, you cannot prove that the lighting here today is green just by looking into the light bulb. But there are some non-physical attributes in the way we produce electricity that is of interest for the consumers. So then we use a digital tracking system to document those non-physical attributes. That is a very, very important distinction, because offsets are something completely different. That is about discounting future emission reductions with all the complexity that adds on. So if you want to do transparent sourcing of renewable energy with credible claims, there are 3 questions you need to ask. When, where, and how? And for years, those questions has not been asked. So most consumers, companies, and private persons alike that have a green tariff, they don't know when the renewable energy was produced. They don't know where it was produced, meaning the specific power plant. And they don't know the impact of the production of renewable energy. And the final question is, where does the money go? And that is very important, because if you know where the money goes, you can start to skew the production of renewable energy. So if you know exactly where, when, and how the energy was produced, then you can also start to talk about, okay, I paid this amount of money. What did you do with it, their producer? Which is quite interesting. So if you use this kind of a picture, I'm not sure where we have it from. It's probably a stock photo. But it's, in my world, this could be for real if the producer of this stack is actually sourcing renewable energy specifically from this wind farm or this windmill. Otherwise, it's bullshit. And I was listening to a panel 4 weeks ago where Google, World Resource Institute, and Green E, Ecolabel on energy in the US, was discussing the future of renewable energy certificates or guarantees origin. And they said something very interesting. They said that these certificates, these guarantees origin or REGOs, they are not a tradable commodity. It is a system for documenting the origin. And they were asking for proof that this market works, meaning that it leads to something positive. And they were saying that what we need is a more granular system leading towards 24/7 matching, which we're going to discuss maybe more in the future in this panel. And they were asking for documentation of distance between where the energy was produced and where it is consumed. So grid connectivity or grid distance. And with this, I just want to move to the panel. And I would like Pip to introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Pip Squire. I'm from ARC Data Centers, where I'm currently head of energy and sustainability. I've been with ARC since before ARC was ARC, and I've been responsible as employee number 1 and have actually been responsible for the design, build and operation of over 100 megawatts of IT space in the UK over the last 15 years. Those people who do know me, and there are some in the room, know that I'm incredibly passionate about energy efficiency and sustainability. I am not an energy trader, and anything I say I'm going to qualify, it relates to the UK grid system, because that's the only one I have a little bit of understanding of. I don't understand the rest of Europe, the rest of the world.
That's why you're here, Pip.
I also want to remind people that what were REGOs really introduced for way back when? 2014 time. Whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's right, our utility systems here are being developed and driven on market forces. So REGOs were brought in to be able to gauge the market, what was the appetite for people to buy or get people to invest in renewable assets. And the answer to the question is really simple. In the old days, a REGO cost you 3p, maybe a penny. I remember my first one was a penny. Now they're what, £8–10? So the answer to the question is absolutely there is a market for renewable energy. But has it actually driven renewable generation in the UK? The answer is kind of difficult to answer, because you don't know where the money that I've paid in my REGO certificates, where's that gone? And that's what HP is talking about. So I have a lot of agreement in terms of where HP is trying to come from. But I'm worried at the moment that just tracking half-hourly data and where it's generated and how it's generated and timestamp absolutely has got a place, but is not addressing the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that if you look at the UK generation market today, and I looked at the data, in the last 12 months, 38% of our generation was gas. 27% was wind. 12% was solar. But actually, on the worst particular day, we were actually running at 60% on gas. And if we start and we continue down this role of putting more and more intermittent renewables onto the system, we're going to make the problem worse. Because if I put my sustainability hat on, for every megawatt of capacity that I actually need, for wind farms, I need 3 of them. With all the carbon that's sitting in them and all the fact that these things on the best possible day, we actually had an excess last summer where we were generating more renewables than we could use. That's a hell of a waste of resource. That's a hell of a waste of sustainable development. So where I'm sitting at the moment, yes, we have PPAs. We negotiate PPAs, and we've got 3 in flight at the moment with solar. We've got an active PPA with an energy from waste plant, which I know is not a fully renewable facility under defined renewables, but it's actually doing a hell of a lot of good in terms of removing about 1/3 of London's waste. But I'm now in a situation where I don't actually want to match a PPA. I don't want to go to the hassle of having HP or somebody else trying to manage that, is that solar farm and this solar farm overexpending and all that little lot. I want my supplier to give me the transparency that tells me where we're at, so that he can become more transparent about how much baseload generation he is using all the time. And actually where I'm trying to get to is, can I get a PPA for a zero carbon baseload generator? Because that is going to be the biggest driver for improving the country's carbon zero target, because then I'm going to get a grid of fossil fuel. And to me at the moment, under renewable energy and where we're at, it's the baseload generation on our grid system that needs to be addressed, and needs to be addressed quickly. And we, as data center operators, we provide a really big baseload demand. Our demand doesn't go up and down hugely. Yes, it goes up and down a bit during the day. It goes up and down a bit over the winter and the summer. But by and large, it's fairly predictable. It's pretty baseload, which means that we can't match load shedding with generation changes. So to be able to match the requirements of the grid, and let's face it, if we can decarbonize the grid to a point where it's 100% zero carbon, I don't need to match this anymore because I know it's 100%. But I don't believe at the moment the market force is going to get there, and the only way we as data center operators can help that is by saying to our PPA guys, yeah, great to have a few intermittent ones, but actually we need a baseload generator.
Let's hold on to two of the topics here, because one is about, let's call it granular matching, and yearly matching.
Yeah.
And the other is about 100% green grid.
Yeah.
Dan, maybe you want to say a few words as an introduction as well.
I mean, I think everyone knows me, so I'm happy not to introduce. I'm going to ask Pip a question, because that's my privilege, I'm afraid. So have you asked them for a zero carbon baseload generation, and what have they said?
At the moment, nobody, well, I'm actually in discussion with somebody about a zero carbon baseload PPA at this very moment in time. I can't say very much about it because it's in its infancy, and because I do not want to be, I'm prepared to be an anchor tenant, but they need to find additional uses, because that particular technology also has a load of heat, and they need to get rid of the heat. The other place that I'm looking at is, and I presume other people in this place are looking at, Drax will give you a 100% baseload element, but then you have a different question. Is biomass really sustainable in terms of its fuel supply? Question mark. Is it ethical? That's the only place in the UK where you could get 100% renewable electricity 100% of the time from Drax.
Okay, I'll just tell you why I'm on here, right? So I've been working with HP for quite some time, and I've been talking to lots of data centers that are out there. And it strikes me that if we can get data centers that are on 100% renewable energy, base load and intermittent loads, then we're moving very close to becoming zero carbon to a certain extent, right? And most of the operators that I've been talking to, things are changing, but quite a few of the operators push this off to their electricity provider. They buy a renewable energy tariff, or they're buying tariffs, and they're not holding them accountable for the certificates. There has been a journey that the industry's been on to not hold the power companies accountable for what they're doing.
Dan, absolutely right. Guilty as charged, right?
And you're not alone.
Yeah,
this is all across, and this is where we come from, because this system was started in 1999 in Amsterdam, actually. And at that point in time, I was in the room. I was not the founder, but I was in the room. And the idea was to start a journey and to get people to, exactly like you said in your introduction, to show that they were committed to buy renewable energy. And then we wanted to improve the system. And we are not at that point now, at a point where the market is actually asking for something more than the producers are able to provide, which is granularity.
Yeah. And you're right, but I am actually physically in discussion with my supplier at the moment, where I'm saying, guys, you're claiming 100% renewable. Now I want you to prove it. I want you to tell me where you're getting your electricity. And I'll actually, let's not go the whole hog, because to get an energy supplier to give me time-stamped half-hourly regos and claim 100% is going to be a really difficult ask. But for them to tell me, actually, I'm going to be using fossil-based fuels for this amount of time, and I've offset them with these ones here, that's a step in the right direction. from where I'm trying to get to.
See, the other thing I would say is that when you look at the price and the increase in price, right, I think that's great, and I think that is a good thing. But the question is, where is that money going to, right? And is that money going to intermediaries that are using it as a tradable commodity and are basically getting rich off the back of the purchase of these assets, or these certificates, or is it actually going into the system and encouraging baseload, intermittent energy generation? And I think part of the conversations that we've had is that the part of the problem with the way the system works is that quite a significant amount of the money that you pay for a REGO, REC, or whatever it is, goes into a number of intermediaries before it actually gets back to the energy generating asset. And that's part of the, understanding where it is and the connection between it, if you like.
So there was a study done by Oslo Economics some years back that showed that more than 80% of the money paid by the energy user for green tariffs never came to the producer of the renewable energy. More than 80%.
But I think that's very interesting, because if you look at your energy bill, or my energy bill at the moment, 50% of my energy bill is tax. I already don't know where 50% of my tariff is going, because it's going into the government's pocket. So we're talking about a tiny little bit here. And what's even more interesting is I was at a discussion with Beringa on Tuesday, and they've done some forward market modelling in terms of what the tariff impacts are going to be over the next 10, 15 years. And the CFD component, contract for difference component of our energy bill, in the next 5 years is going to go from around, and I think it's about 12%, to over 40%. So what does that mean in terms of your PPA price if you're going to buy or start negotiating a PPA? Because it means your PPA, your generator, is going to be able to get almost a better price out of the grid because of the CFD component than he's going to get out of us. So that whole government skew of taxes is beginning in the UK, is beginning to skew it away from the influence that we, as people who can buy PPAs, can actually do, simply just because the way the structure is done. And so that's kind of complicated, and that, to me, is what makes it difficult for me to build a business case that says, actually, I want to pay the extra to match my half-hourlies to be able to trace all those monies, because actually that component of my electricity bill is so small compared to everything else that I have to pay.
But it comes down to, I guess, it's been said many times, but transparency.
Agreed.
Either you demand transparency from your electricity supplier,
Correct.
or you take the job yourself and create transparency all the way to the power plant yourself. Both are actually possible. And then you can, I think, then you can do two very interesting things. You can start to talk with your supplier about when it was produced. And to be honest, I don't really see the point of going all the way to 15 minutes yet. No. I think we should be more than happy if we can go to hourly matching at this stage. That is already complex enough. And the other is about where, and meaning that you actually can show the grid distance or the location of the production, so that you can prove to your stakeholders that this is produced in the same time as you consume, and it is produced in a place that is geographically located in a relevant distance from where you consume electricity.
Well, I think on that point, right, where does greenwashing start and where does greenwashing end, right? So if you go to Frankfurt and you buy a data center contract in Frankfurt for capacity in Frankfurt, and it's 100% renewable energy, yes, it might be behind the wire, it might be an agreement, a joint venture with a energy generating asset, and it might be 100% renewable energy, but there's a good chance that they've been procuring RECs or GEOs from somewhere like Norway, who export 53% of their...
I absolutely agree. Location, where HP is right, location is absolutely fundamental as to where you get, and that's where I'm having the difficulty with my baseload PPA, is to get proof that that generation asset, if it is actually built, will be local to where I need it, rather than in the north of Scotland or wherever it might to be, because then that's not really bringing the benefit that goes with what I see as a generation asset that is going to be in a resource-starved area of the UK. And the other thing that complicates things in the UK is, of course, connections. Probably all agree with that. Connection agreements and getting the grid upgraded to be able to deal with it is impossible. You know, looking at my PPAs at the moment, connection agreements are 5 to 7 years away. And that's kind of hard because you need those connection agreements to be able to get your renewable assets online, to be able to get your balancing put in. And it all comes back to my fundamental statement is that we need to address the elephant in the room, that our balancing system, no matter where we are in the UK, our balancing system for our electricity supply is the grid, and the grid is not fossil free. And until we've got that dealt with, we've got a problem.
Let's move. Let's hold on to the PPA,
yes.
But move a little bit on. We have all heard about PPAs as corporate PPAs as the solution, and then we hear about unbundled REGOs or unbundled GOs being procured as well. And I want to have the comments on what is the benefits of PPA versus the benefits of unbundled certificates.
The PPA, no doubt, is better than an unbundled certificate.
Why is that?
Because, well, let's put it this way. My unbundled certificates at the moment are literally, yes, I have procured electricity. I don't actually know from my provider, although he does actually give me certificates at the end of every year, which says here are the ones that have been retired, but they're not actually, and they cover all the megawatts I've used, but not in the times that I've used them. So those are pretty good to me at the moment. A PPA gives me renewable energy, but it again is untimestamped. So actually, when I think about it, your question is they're the same.
Exactly.
They're the same.
They're the same.
They're the same.
That's my point as well, because a PPA is a long-term power contract.
Agreed.
And then you add the certificates to the PPA in order to make it green.
Yeah.
So it's just a
No, they're the same.
electricity.
Agreed. Agreed.
Then we agree.
Yes, agreed. I hadn't thought of it like that before, but I like it.
Dan, what do you think?
Sorry, I was doing something else.
We will move on.
That's terrible, isn't it?
I was thinking about another topic.
One of the things I was going to say is that it becomes more challenging as the power price goes up as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm assuming, because it's a smaller percentage. The certificates become a smaller percentage of your total cost. So they're almost an add-on, aren't they? So where your power's coming from it's an add-on. It's not a primary thought. Your primary thought is to try and get your power rate.
That's a very interesting discussion. We took a decision 10 years ago that actually price didn't matter. It needed to have some form of green element on the edge of that. And that was a decision that was the right thing to have made. I had a very big argument with a German bank, I won't say which one, about the benefits of nuclear power generation. At the time, I had an EDF contract. It was carbon zero, but they wouldn't take it because it was nuclear. And they walked away from that deal for the simple reason my power purchase agreement or my power agreement was nuclear. Today, I think they'd have bit my hand off if I'd done that, but that's the way of it. So renewable, and I use the term renewable loosely, and I think we need to move away from renewable, because everybody thinks renewable needs to be wind, solar, hydro, right? We need to move to carbon zero. And for my sins, I spent a number of years in my youth working in nuclear waste at Sellafield and nuclear power, and absolutely the solution where I see it is nuclear power as a baseload generation has got to be somewhere in the mix. Because that's the only way to go forward.
We have a common history there, because I have actually been an activist outside Sellafield.
So on that point, which is probably quite a good point, is that my understanding is that there's a difference between carbon-free and renewable.
Yes,
correct.
Right? So,
but we need both.
I don't know whether it is obvious to everyone what the difference is between carbon-free and renewable.
Yep.
And my understanding, again, is that if it's renewable, it's got the attribute,
Yeah.
If it's carbon-free, it doesn't have an attribute.
Well, actually, it can have, because we now also have this guarantees origin for nuclear production. So you can also now buy digital certificates documenting the production of nuclear.
But it has to have a certificate to be classified as renewable. Is that?
Well, it's never classified as renewable. It's classified as nuclear,
That's
but
right.
carbon-free.
Carbon zero.
Okay.
So a certificate from a nuclear power plant in France, that would not be classified as renewable under the certificate scheme. It would be classified as nuclear, with additional information on the carbon footprint and the nuclear waste fractions, showing that it's carbon-free, but it has a nuclear waste component.
So if I'm in Norway, say, and I'm a data center operator in Norway, Bulker here somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And I've got 20 megawatts. Do I still need certificates of origin because it's 100% hydropower?
Yeah, that is a good question, because and that's one of my topics as well. That's about location-based carbon accounting and market-based carbon accounting. Because if you follow the Scope 2 guidance document by World Resource Institute, you have read that you have to use two numbers in your carbon reporting: Scope 2 location-based and a market-based figure. And the question then is, in Norway, 100% of the production is renewable and is matched of approximately 100% one-to-one with the consumption of electricity. Do you then need certificates? The answer is a clear yes. Because in Norway and in Europe as such, you have a market-based system called REGOs, or guarantees origin, meaning that somebody is actually holding on to these attributes, and they're somebody's property. So if you use location-based figures, you are claiming something that is somebody else's right or property. These certificates, they have a market value, and they are the property of the producer until they decide to sell it. Yeah. So if you use a location-based figure in your carbon matrix or carbon accounting, you are assuming and you are theorizing about your carbon accounting. If you want to do it properly, you make sure that you have a cancelled or retired guarantee origin attached to your electricity supply. That is the only way you can prove credibly the claim, and it's the only way you can show in your carbon accounting a Scope 2 reduction.
Okay, cool.
So the answer to that is both in that particular case.
Yeah, but I do think that there is a bit of a, because a lot of this from a data center operator perspective is driven by the customer's requirement.
But it's a conception in Norway that you don't need these certificates because everything is produced renewable.
But I also think it's that when you're looking at customer requirements, like, there was a deal that was done with a big automotive company that were going into a Norwegian data center, but they didn't want to pay the extra amount for the certificates because they felt they were going into a location that's 100% renewable. So there's definitely not a full understanding of...
Something has changed. Just last week, there was a press release showing that the major aluminum producer in Norway, Norwegian Hydro, strange name, but they are producing aluminum, they now, for the first time, went public, saying that they are now procuring guarantees origin for their electricity consumption in Norway. We can only speculate about why, but only 2 weeks before they also announced a big deal with Mercedes, which we know are very, very clear on the documentation they need, which is based on guarantees origin.
So I think
there's actually a question back there.
Yeah, he's going to ask an awkward question, so I'm not going to ask him. What's the question, Noah?
Yeah. Yeah, so...
And so the Norway example is a really important aspect of that, but how do you think about it? And then more broadly, is it something we need to consider in the market-based?
Yeah, so just to keep everybody on board, You have the flip side of buying renewable energy with guaranteed origin is the residual mix. So if you decide not to buy guaranteed origin for your electricity consumption, then you have to take whatever is left in the grid. That is called the residual emission, residual mix. And the methodology for that was developed in 2 rounds through some, 2 projects called the REDIS 1 and 2, and they developed a methodology of how to calculate that residual mix. That methodology has been implemented across Europe as part of the implementation of guarantees origin, country by country. But that is a calculation, so it is not perfect. What we see now is that country after country is deciding to go to what we call full disclosure, meaning that you get guarantees origin for all energy types. You get it for wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, coal, gas, whatever. And then it's up to the market to decide which of these certificates has a market value. Those that does not have a market value, they rotate back into the residual mix. So you get a complete and exact carbon accounting of all the attributes. So we have a system that works, but it's not perfect, and we are moving towards something that will be perfect, which is based on the same methodology as financial accounting.
Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes left, and then we're going to change to the next session. Just, Pip, have you got any closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts, as a bit boring engineer that I am, is that we need to get away from the concept of everybody wanting 100% renewable 100% of the time for the next 10 years, because we can't do that. It's just physically not possible. You know, our generation supply just doesn't allow it to happen. What we need to get is an acceptable way that shows that we are doing the right things to be able to drive the national assets to a point where they will be carbon zero.
And that's about asking the right questions.
That's about asking the right questions of your supplier and the developers that you're working with to be able to get that the right way, and then asking them to be transparent in what they're doing. Because if a supplier actually, instead of giving you a certificate that says you've got 100% green energy for the rest of it, actually turns around and says, my mix is this, and you are getting these elements of it, then we'll actually get a true driver, and then the public, and it's all about public perception, because, you know, at the moment we're talking very much around what data centers can do, but we need to recognize that actually the actions that we do must not be in a position where we actually put prices in a place where we end up causing fuel poverty in certain other areas. And the place I was with on Tuesday, you know, fuel poverty is a real issue among other major users, housing associations and things like that. So whatever we do, we've got to be moving in a place that actually addresses the whole of society rather than just our own particular insular requirements.
Right.